What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to episode 3 of the 2023 Halloween special. I had a lot of fun in the first 2 episodes talking about some older movies, and we're still talking about an older movie today, but it's much more modern compared to the 2 other films that I've discussed. Because today we are indeed discussing Steven Spielberg's Jaws, the 1975 classic that has terrified audiences for generations. The film was released in 1975 and it stars Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. Can I just start off with the fact that Steven Spielberg was only 27 when he made this movie? I mean, there are so many classic films out there that those directors just didn't make until they were much older, much more seasoned filmmakers. Spielberg made this movie when he was 27 years old. That is less than 10 years older than I am now. That's 9 years older than I am at the moment. That's insane. What's even more insane is that when Spielberg took this job, he wasn't intending to make a classic. He didn't set out to even really make a good movie. In fact, he specifically wanted to make just a very fun, lighthearted, cheesy B movie that would be shown on television and maybe released in some theaters. So you add his initial intention with the film on top of all the trouble that he went through during the production and getting the movie made and getting certain things to work, it's honestly astonishing that this movie came out the way it did. And look, this movie's been talked about to death. There's nothing that I can tell you about it that we don't already know. We already know it's one of the greatest movies of all time. Everybody has at least heard of Jaws and knows about Jaws and can probably quote a few lines from Jaws. Find any boomer in your area and ask them, hey, what's a classic movie? I guarantee you at least 80% of them will say Jaws without even thinking about it. All jokes aside, every generation adores this film. Look, there's some movies that are considered classics, but you don't really see younger generations or more recent generations like millennials to Gen Z really gravitating towards them or showing them a lot of love, even though in film history contexts they are seen as classic films. But then there's movies like Jaws, where it is passed down through each generation, and every single generation has an enormous amount of its population just fall in love with it because it's genuinely that great. Jaws is one of my favorite movies. I also think it's one of the few movies out there that I will call perfect. And what's funny is the first time that I actually sat down to watch Jaws all the way through, actually sat down in front of the TV, put it on to watch it from beginning to end, I think I was 7 years old, and I didn't like it. I thought it was very boring. I wasn't entertained by the movie at all, which is crazy because so many people have such amazing stories of the first time they watched Jaws being about that age, 6 to 12, sort of in that range, and just falling in love with it. And they sort of use that as a testament to how great the film is, that even at that young of an age, when you're not as capable of comprehending deeper themes and enjoying the filmmaking techniques behind a film that you're watching, they still fell in love with it. But it was different for me. I didn't the first time I watched it. I thought it was boring. I tried to watch it multiple times because everybody was telling me how amazing it was. It's Jaws. Obviously. This seems like such stupid shit to say, but because it's just so ingrained in our culture. Everybody knows Jaws. Everybody knows Jaws is great. Let's move on, But for that 7-year-old kid, it was all new to me. Everybody, I was oh my god, this is everybody's favorite movie. Okay, let's watch it. And I just didn't enjoy it. But as I got more and more into filmmaking growing up, when I hit 8 years old and then 9 years old, making little silly short films on an iPod Touch, making iMovie trailers in the backyard with all of my cousins. The older I got, especially into my early teens, when I really started to understand filmmaking and also just really truly what makes a great movie, I fell in love with this movie just like everybody else, and it became one of my favorite movies. And it's so hilarious to me that I ever thought this movie was boring, because this movie is so incredibly paced. You are sucked into it right from the opening scene, that infamous opening scene when we get our first kill of the film, and it instantly sets up the threat and you don't even see it, which builds up the terror of this creature. Everybody knows this, but most of the reason why the shark isn't really shown that much throughout the first 2/3 of this movie is because the mechanical shark that was built kept malfunctioning and kept breaking and just randomly sinking, and it would just stop working. So Spielberg instead had to improvise on set and use other techniques to imply the shark's presence, which honestly, I understand that had the shark been working, it probably would have been a very different viewing experience watching this movie. But the fact that it wasn't, and the fact that Spielberg had to rely on other things, makes this movie so much better than I think it would have been. Because it's a tale as old as time that our imaginations will fill in the gaps with things significantly more terrifying than what's actually there, which keeps us in suspense. It's also a superbly written film based on Peter Benchley's novel, which I enjoy, but I do feel like is a little overbloated with a little too much character drama, sort of detracts from the pacing of the story, which is why I think this is one of the best adapted screenplays ever written, because it was able to do the terror and the tension and the characters of the source material so much justice, while also knowing exactly what to cut for the sake of a new medium. That's something The Last of Us show also did very well, actually, knowing what to change from its source material, what to keep, what to do justice, and what they could tweak and change a little bit so that it fits the television medium much better. And I do plan on doing videos on The Last of Us at some point. It's not on the list of things to review for the Halloween special, but I will talk about Last of Us at some point, obviously. But yeah, this movie has incredibly written and well fleshed out characters. Chief Brody, Hooper, Quint. I mean, these are some of the most iconic characters in film history, arguably the most iconic. There's a lot of modern day movies that I love and that I love the acting in, but it is kind of rare to get a movie like this nowadays where every scene just feels so slice of life. It feels so realistic. Like the way the dialogue is written, the way the characters talk and interact with each other, the way they go back and forth, it just feels real. And there's modern day movies, sort of like Perks of Being a Wallflower, for instance, where I'm like, oh, it feels so realistic and so raw, but that doesn't mean it genuinely is. Perks of Being a Wallflower is also one of my favorite movies, and I do think that the dialogue in that movie, the way characters interact, are so real for that story and for the emotion it's trying to evoke. But if we're talking about just stripped of genre, just objectively just looking at a conversation scene between two characters or a group of characters, what would be the criteria for that, regardless of genre, for it to feel realistic? How would it have to be written to transcend the stigma surrounding each and every genre of film? Jaws just does that so well. The way these characters interact with each other just feels pulled right from real life. Like, I really don't know how to describe it. It's all in those performances, man. Those performances, they just sell it. They feel like real people. Amity feels like a town that existed before this movie happened. These characters feel like they're going to live on after the movie ends, except for Quint, obviously. The only actor in the movie that's very much hamming it up and portrays a character that has been memed for generations is the mayor, but it somehow works. I really don't know how this guy made it work, but he really did. Amity is a summer town. We need summer dollars. If the people can't swim here, they'll go over to Cape Cod or whatever. I don't know what it is about his voice, man. His character is so fun to watch. It's very hard for me to look away from the screen when he's on it. And honestly, probably the most iconic part of this movie. I mean, it's a part of this movie that even people who have never seen Jaws, when they hear it, they know it instantly, and most people can hum it and sing it on command without having ever seen the film, and that is, of course, John Williams' masterful score. And what's even more incredible about it is that the main production piece of this track is really just 3 alternating notes. Da-da, da-da, I mean, we've all heard it, we all know it, and then you get the little spice added in with the da-da-da. By the way, that is a very fun track to play on piano, because it starts off super simple, like the but then you get to sneak this hand and just go It's so much fun to play. But so much of the tension in this movie is built around the fact that you're not actually seeing the shark, but maybe objects are moving when it's around, and that way you know where it is. And then on top of that, you add this genius score. I mean, it's just suspense perfection. That being said, my only flaw with the movie, and I'm not going to downgrade the movie for this, because the fact that they actually went out of their way to build a physical, mechanical shark is just something that no shark movie today would ever even think of doing. But in the third act of this movie, which is one of the best third acts of all time. No question, no question, I have no questions. When you do see the shark in full, when it's not like fully underwater and it jumps on the back of the boat, it is very clear that it is a machine. And when it doesn't have Quint in its mouth and its jaws just sort of flapping up and down, like it's very obvious, like, yes, this is a machine, but it still looks like a real thing that is there hurting these people, because it is a real thing that you are seeing that is there. And I do prefer that to a lot of the terrible CGI in more modern day shark movies. Also, something the MPAA does is go back and re-rate movies when they're re-released. Jaws has been re-released several times, whether on physical or in theaters, and somehow it has never been re-rated. This movie is still PG. No? If this exact movie came out today, there is no way it would be PG. It would be at least PG-13, and honestly, for Quint's death, by today's standards, it might have gotten the R. Which, by the way, this is something that I might get some opposition about, but I'm not entirely opposed to a Jaws remake. Hear me out. Just hear me out. A Jaws remake directed by somebody like, I don't know, Robert Eggers or maybe Fede Alvarez or something, that more focuses on just dark, looming tension. Not these really heightened, frantic, suspenseful sequences, but more so focuses on just how deep the ocean is, how creepy it genuinely is down there, and the slow, creeping approaching of this creature. I genuinely think it would be incredible. Give it an R rating, have some shockingly violent deaths in there, have it be darker and just more a tone like a movie like, I don't know, I'm having a hard time thinking of another movie to describe it to. What I'm saying is I think it could be really, really cool. That being said, if they were going to do that, I definitely think they should take it in their own direction and sort of change things about the story so that it doesn't feel like a carbon copy, only with added tone and atmosphere and color palettes and things like that, directing style. I would want them to change more aspects of the story than just that to make it really feel like its own thing and not just a cash grab. Now, I mentioned how incredible that third act is, and yeah, it is one of the greatest, most suspenseful third acts of all time. And my favorite scene in the film, and it's also Spielberg's favorite scene in the film, he has said this, is the scene of the three of them in the hull of the boat talking about their scars and their past traumas. It is so well acted, the best acting from all three of these actors throughout their entire careers, honestly. And it just adds so much weight to these characters, and it's placed so perfectly in the film. It's placed right before that final showdown to really, for one final moment, communicate the bond between these three men and how emotionally attached to each other they are and how they're in this together and how endearing they are as characters. Putting that right before the final fight is genius. This movie is just perfectly directed. I mean, we all know this. Spielberg is probably the most well-known director of all time. He has made classic after classic after classic, and it's understandable why. This man is just a beast. He's still a beast. I recently watched The Fabelmans, his most recent movie. He is still on his A game. His directing never wavers. But again, it's the fact that he was 27 when he made this movie. That's not fair. How did he perfectly direct a film at age 27? I feel like I'm hyper-focusing on that, but anyway, guys, there's not really anything else I can say about this film that you haven't already heard. It is one of the best movies of all time. I adore Jaws. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I do want to share kind of a cool experience. My boyfriend grew up somewhat sheltered, and he didn't get to see a lot of these classic movies that everybody knows about, and a lot of like modern day mainstream stuff as well. So I've sort of taken it upon myself to show him all the essential things with pop culture, pretty much, like with modern day mainstream cinema, classic cinema, and things like that. This movie was re-released in the theaters where I used to live down in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and I realized that Lucas had never seen the movie before, and I was like, "You've never seen Jaws?" So I was like, screw this, man. We are buying tickets. It is showing at our theater. We are going to see it. And I was so jealous at Lucas. If you're watching this video, I was so jealous of you because your first experience with Jaws was in a theater. The majority of the population's first experience with Jaws was in front of a TV screen when they were kids. Your first experience was when you were already a teenager capable of comprehending deeper ideas and you got to see it in a theater. That's crazy. I am so jealous of you. But anyway, I really can't say anything else about the movie. I'm gonna go ahead and rate the film. You guys know what's coming. I'm going to give Jaws, obviously, a very well-deserved 10 out of 10. Guys, thank you so much for returning to watch the 2023 Halloween special. Please look forward to episode 4 of the special. Very excited to continue to talk about horror movies through this month with you guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.